Welcome to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we help healthcare providers succeed on purpose. We take a conversational approach in learning from others who have been there and done that. Join us as we share expert insights from real people who are just like you, because we believe that success isn't just a destination. It's an intentional journey, and you don't have to do it alone.
All right, welcome back to the Healthy Careers Podcast. Today I have Andrew Wickwire, who is a seasoned PA and a PA leader. He is out in Fresno, California, and has tons of experience within leadership as well as a non-traditional background and how he got to being a PA. So I'm excited for this episode to kind of unpack what that looks like, how he got into a lead APP spot, what he does, and also a little bit about the intensity behind surgical specialties and mindset around how dealing with the, own trauma of being in a trauma specialty and dealing with death every single day. So welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Madison, thanks for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been in contact back and forth and stayed in touch. And so I've watched what you've done, but if you could just give us a brief introduction as to your role and the specialties that you are a lead APP over.
Yeah, so I'm the team lead for the trauma, burn, and vascular surgery services at the hospital of Community Regional Hospital, downtown Fresno. I work for a medical group called CCFMG, or Central California Faculty Medical Group, who is partnered with UCSF, the UCSF that you would know. And all of our staff surgeons essentially are professors or assistant professors at UCSF. And that's part of where the level 1 trauma comes into play here with the residencies that we have.
Awesome.
And yeah, I guess to answer your question about where I came from, that was part of it, right? With the background.
Yeah. I want to talk about that because you have, I think a lot of people that I know that are PAs and Ps are in the medical profession. It's like you hear like, I knew I wanted to be a PA when I was 16 and I went and did this and got my hours and went to school. And then I, became a PA and here I am. And you did not take that traditional route. So I think let's talk about that because I think so many people might be inspired and maybe go back to school.
Yeah. So I originally was born and raised in Turkey. I moved here in 2005 when I was 18 and then just started hustling and working, did a couple construction jobs, and then ended up working for a couple of companies in business, doing sales, and then essentially moving around from company to company because of life circumstances, and just got to a point where I was kind of fed up, honestly, just working for an organization that was just kind of always focusing on their needs. And then I decided to get into healthcare. We became a nurse's assistant, did that. Said if I could do that for 6 months, I could probably do this for a lot longer. Ended up doing that for a year and a half on the side while I put myself through school full time. And
awesome.
was then going to go to, I went to Liberia, Africa, and spent 6 weeks there working as just helping hand, just with the intentions of not getting involved in anything that I would cause harm in, because Africa's different, so different.
I would imagine.
I was exposed to some PAs that were doing some crazy things, C-sections, appies, trauma resuscitations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like the scope of practice in some other areas is very different.
I was just really, and probably the shortages as well of providers.
The
probably
disparity
yields them
overseas.
to have to.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the disparity is super real overseas, and especially the ones that have succumbed to like civil wars. You can just imagine what the Middle East conflict's going to produce, and as far as the needs. But yeah, I came back. I was thinking of just becoming a doc and pursuing surgery to some extent, and then really put some thought into it. And at that age and point in time, I had worked so much. I was in my essentially, mid 30s, my late 20s, that I was just like, I don't want to spend a decade of time. And in retrospect, part of that process and thinking through that, I might have thought through it a little bit more, but it made a lot of sense to pursue the PA profession
Yeah.
at that point in time. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really been disappointed with my decision. And having now worked in trauma surgery for 7 years, now also, charged with the task of helping manage a pretty solid group of APPs. It's now kind of come full circle, and it's at the point in time in my career now, it's just kind of like looking at things and be like, man, I don't know how this time went by so fast. And I think that's going
Yeah.
to be the story of a lot of people out there in this profession, especially over the last like 5 years leading into the next, decade.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people that are going to grow with this profession. And that's an opportunity, right? That's a huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would also argue too that I think a lot of people may think a non-traditional track is somehow less than the people that just went to school for it right off the bat. But you had life experience that a lot of people don't get, and you
Mm.
had seen the real world outside of just being a PA. I work with a lot of new grads, and I think the number one challenge I have is the skills that you can't teach, right? Basic communication, follow up, things that if you had been in any other career prior to school and been exposed to working with people, you would have a sense that that is vital in
Yeah,
in your job,
absolutely.
especially as a clinician. And so I think people that take that non-traditional route, or that maybe did some other things before becoming a medical provider, they do better and probably lend themselves better in lead positions like you are now, because they have that understanding of, like you said, the business behind healthcare, and not just I'm a medical professional.
Yeah,
Um, it- yeah. Do you think that that helped you?
it's yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, and honestly, just being upfront and honest with people,
Yeah.
having worked in business and done sales at a, not like the highest level, but like at a pretty high level. You
Hmm.
have to set expectations up front, and having those conversations like an adult in a room where you don't feel like, I don't know. It's like I always had like an imposter syndrome where every company that I worked at, because I felt like I owed them something. And then I realized my value. And then I realized that it's a partnership. It's not just a one-way highway. Um, and being able to effectively communicate things. And, if you're bringing up a problem, bringing up a reasonable solution to the problem at the same time, so that you're not just coming across as a complainer, is a big
Right.
deal. Um, and I think that a lot of hospitals would be really hungry for that kind of commitment from their team members, where the the desires to see whatever they're involved in improved. And that
Hmm.
the background of being, you may be somebody that's coming back and doubling back and starting this as their second career. That's a huge positive to be walking into the workforce with, if you have the ability to communicate with
Yeah.
people, the education to be able to help substantiate your thoughts logically,
Hmm.
be able to critically think. That's a big deal. Be able to think through the lens of something without, not thinking about all the problems that it's going to cause. That's a especially in hospitals,
Yeah.
because every decision you make in a hospital has a domino effect down the road. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also the ability. I grew up, my parents owned a restaurant, and I grew up probably by the time I was 6 years, no, not six, probably 8, 9 years old, washing dishes, folding pizza boxes, helping prep things, going with my parents to get the ingredients, serving soft drinks over the counter. And then throughout college, I bartended and I waited tables.
Good
And
for
I
you.
honestly, when people ask me, like, where did you get that sales or that pace or that motivation from? I think everybody should work in a position where you have to be client facing and deal with the general public before going into anything, because it's what lended me to my
Restaurant.
success now.
Yeah, we got a. I just like, I'm not the most professional person in the world, but like, we got some killers on our team. Right. One of them's name is
Yeah.
Megan, and she has a similar background to you. And she is just,
Yeah.
it's there's some people that have these quality traits with them, and the way that they, show themselves. You can tell it's their background,
Hmm.
having worked with people, dealt with frustrated customers, knowing how to, have a social IQ about what's going on, and maybe not how not to
Hmm.
step on toes. Stepping on toes is okay, right? But you got to do it the right way, and you got to understand what
Yeah.
the ramifications of doing that is. And that's been a real life challenge of learning hospital surgical medicine and having to talk to people bluntly about things. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
real life experience of what you're talking about and working in restaurants, if you haven't done retail or worked in a restaurant, like you said, customer facing
You're going to struggle with the
experiences.
people skills.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge bonus. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And I think too, I mean, I like what you said about it's okay to step on feet. I've always felt that stepping on feet can be good because it's uncomfortable, but if it's the right thing, it's going to lead to positive change.
Right.
So sometimes it
Yeah.
takes stepping on feet, especially in hospitals where a lot of times it's like, here's the policy, here's the red tape. If you come outside of the red tape, like that's a no-no. But what if outside of the red tape is more effective? What if outside of the red tape is going to lead to better patient outcomes? So
Those
I
are
think
your Elon Musks, right? Those are the guys that just don't care what the structure says. They're here to do something. And that's the mindset of most of the people. And I'm going to say it, like the hospitals have lost sight of this. You go through our hospital, the hallways are lined with patients. Things look like a disaster zone, but the business is growing. There is a realistic understanding of like that, sometimes taking the red tape off and re-looking at yourself. And this comes from like an introspective like realization myself too, is like walking into the position that I'm in right now. I have to pay attention to how I walk, how I talk, how I engage with people, because now it's more of like I have more people looking at me more critically. And that was not something I was super ready for. I just wanted to help keep growing a team. But it's like, but at the same time, there are things that we all have to do to align ourselves with the development of the mission that we've joined. And that takes a lot of, self-coaching too, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah. Biting your tongue in situations where you otherwise have an opinion sometimes, and leading by example, even if in the moment you wish it could be something else. I think a lot of times in medicine, I compare it to like every business should operate like Chik-Fil-A in my mind, right? You go to Chik-Fil-A and they're, I mean, I went today for lunch, I'm not even going to lie. And I thought to myself, dang, they've really got it figured out from a business model, right? You walk in and there's this old lady and she's like, good morning. And I'm like, well, good morning to you too,
Right,
you feel welcomed. I had my mug and they asked if I wanted some water. I said, no, I'm okay. He said, how about I fill up that mug? I'm like, nope, it's okay. I've got some water, but thank you. And then while we're eating, somebody comes around, sees how we're doing. And I said, their overhead has got to be ridiculous because they have way more many people than needed to run this restaurant. But most businesses operate the opposite. They have not enough people. So then your customer, your patient, however you want to label it, your consumer is the one that gets the tail end of that. And they're the one that's impacted the most.
Chick-fil-A is a great example because of, I have friends that that own, I guess it's own operate.
Yes, they're a franchise, right?
They're ish. Yeah, they are a franchise, but they only hire from within, which is also interesting. But that is their protective quality for culture, right? So in somebody that's trying to help guide something, right? I'm not responsible for any of the success of our team. I am a person that is in a position to just help guide things and take part in it because I want to have fun too. I want to come to work and have a good time with my colleagues. At the end of the day, a chest tube's a chest tube, a central line's a central line, a trauma resuscitation is a trauma resuscitation. But if I can do it with people that I'm really jamming with, man, that's what I like.
Makes it easier.
That's what I like.
So let's talk about that because in your role now, you are onboarding, helping, I guess the word is assimilate new hires that are coming on board. And you are within specialties that are very intense and that do, I think, especially as somebody maybe coming out of school, they're not going to have the confidence from day one to go into vascular surgery, to go into trauma surgery. How do you wrap your mind around that? And what is the philosophy that you as a leader, or however you want to label yourself, I mean, to me, you are a leader on your team. How do you assimilate that into the culture and get them ready for those very intense surgical roles?
Yeah, I guess the best thing that I can see is like having structure and set expectations is just really healthy overall. Is something that I've learned. It's good in personal relationships. It's good in business relationships, and in the context of someone trying to get their toes wet in the world of trauma surgery. Not having any kind of declared structure, it only breeds more chaos. And the last thing that you want in a chaotic environment is people feeling like they are not comfortable. And the ways that we're kind of seeing now, and this is Madison, this is what we're actively working on right now, is trying to implement, structure. And this is everything that we're doing is off of the hard work and the backs of the people who have already laid out what they feel was the way to do it, but then that was never transcribed into like onboarding documents, and you know what I mean,
actionable deliverables.
Right. But that's okay too, because we were talking about like the profession being young earlier, right? Since the 60s now into the 70s, for anybody to become competent in this in trauma surgery, you're at least 4 years. And that's you actually doing trauma, right? Not just rounding on the floor, dabbling in trauma ICU. It's you doing the floor, admin, perioperative stuff. It's doing trauma resuscitations on nights. It's working through the ICU, the trauma critical care and surgical ICU. And then you realize, these general surgeons that then went and did a fellowship for 2 years, they put 5 years into a residency, 2 years into a critical care fellowship, and now they're the boss, right? And you want to scratch what they're itching, you got to put time into it. And so as the profession's developed, all these people, like the guys that mentored me, they essentially laid out a groundwork for us. And now it's our responsibility to take the hard work that they've put in and, like you said, put it into actionable work so that we have a better way of getting people into this process of learning how to be a facilitator of patient care. Because I am the right-hand man of Dr. Jim Davis or Dr. Larry Sue or Dr. Amy Kwok. These are the people, as soon as they say they're in the operating doing something, a trauma resuscitation's coming in, a trauma code, a trauma response, whatever, they're not there. And so part of my responsibility as a senior person with the trauma team is to know how to follow the protocols, right? It's not rocket science, but you got to spend time in it to get comfortable. And like the end of that, you could read all the books you want. You could be as book smart as you want. If you don't spend time in the environment that you're trying to run in, you're never going to get efficient at it, right? So the training
experience
part of it,
always trumps.
Yeah. Oh, you have to have time in the chaos for sure.
Yeah. And with that being said, I'd be curious to know from your perspective, because you've been responsible for the hiring, and I'm always curious just because of what I do. What have you found to be the qualities that maybe you are interviewing somebody that's coming out of school and they don't know, if they may not have done a trauma rotation, right? They may not have had any exposure to this, but they're like, hey, I'm open to learning and I'm open to coming on board and doing this. What have you found to be kind of those key qualities or things that have then lended to being strong PAs 3, 4, 5 years down the road?
So I'm going to preface this. I've only been doing this for a year and a half. I've been with the team for 7 years. And I've seen people scale with the team at different paces. Yeah. So I can give you some insight to that, but for me to speak from a position of authority on that would be misplaced. But a lot of the people that I've seen kind of come through, they have a conscientiousness about them and a real interest in taking care of people. There's a certain amount of where technology will be, and it definitely is going to evolve into the future, but you still need compassionate people bedside that care about what they're doing. And that right there is like in the interview process or anything like that. I have just like anybody that has interviewed with me, I hope that they understand that by the end of the 3 or 4 or 5 phone calls that we've had, if you're not being real with me, there's no way I can help you. Because we try to coach people out of the job more than we try to coach them into it, because we want them to know, one, moving to Fresno is hard, right? It's not San Diego, it's not LA, it's not Chicago, right? But then also the work is hard. And so it's like you have to, like on our side, if we are not brutally honest with people, we end up getting team fits that are maybe not well executed on both sides. We have ownership in that, and so does the applicant. It's never one-sided.
Yeah.
And so part of the process that I've like really tried to impress upon applicants is that if we're on the phone and we're talking about stuff, you're going to hear it from me 100% the way you need to hear it, because this is not, and I respect everything, right? But you're not filling out an application to be a grocery bagger, right?
No,
people's lives.
There's no like start and leave in 3 months, because it's not
You're
conducive
wasting
to
my
growth
time,
on anybody's part.
Exactly. And that's where you start getting into like cross-functional teams and higher levels of understanding. And the best way to speak to an adult is like an adult, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not getting the vibes like an adult, we shouldn't be having this conversation. And that's just the truth.
Right.
Brutal honesty is really the best. And sometimes we're a little too honest in trauma surgery, but that comes with the territory.
I think you have to be. I think you need to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you find that, I would imagine from my standpoint, and I also think that you are probably that way. I always like to say, call out the elephant in the room when I'm talking to somebody about something. And I always say, kill the deal before they can, right? Like tell them all the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then let them decide, is this for them? Because the worst that you're going to do is have somebody say, you know what, this isn't a fit for me. And you can go, okay, great. Let's keep lines of communication open. And maybe down the road, I can help you. And then if you have somebody that goes, you know what, I've heard it all. I'm sold. Let's do this. Then okay, I've got somebody that's bought in. There's nothing that has to be left uncovered. There's no stone unturned that could 6 months down the road cause me to have to go backfill and find somebody else for this team, which again, costs money, wastes time, doesn't do a good for anybody involved. And I think in my industry, there's a lot of people trying to like trick and like, oh, we just won't tell them about this one little thing and then just hope for the best. And you can't do that, especially not in medicine.
It's called shady business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is part of it for the people that are trying to find the place that they want to land. You want to make sure that when you're talking with whoever it is that you're interviewing with, that they're being authentic, right?
Yeah.
The last thing that you want to be doing is putting on a face and then, encountering a fake face, right? It's like, you gotta be real. You gotta be upfront.
Yeah. And some people are good actors and actresses, some people will fool you, but I think, but for the most part, I think what I found in people that are interested in surgery is either they came out of school knowing like, I want to be in the OR. I want to be in those intense environments. I love it. That's what motivates them. Or maybe they're open to learning it and they have the ability to be a continuous learner. And like you said, to be able to adapt to that environment and understand how to be mentored and how to be coached rather than just come in and think, well, I went to PA school, so I've got this, I know what to do, because you don't. It takes I think outside of the industry, it's like 6 months to truly know a job and learn it. In medicine, I would gather that it's years, especially for a surgical specialty.
Yeah. In trauma surgery, I think what a lot of people will say is that they feel like they're ready for something and they don't know what they're talking about. Like we get a person that just comes on and they think that they're ready for the higher acuity, they're ready for the higher intensity things. And then, it's like, that is our role right now, is trying to understand where someone's at. And then it's the decisions that we make are for people scaling up with our team individually. It's a family decision, right? That's the best way that I can put it. I talk to all the traumatologists and we sit down and talk and like, hey, what do you think about XYZ? I want to bring them to nights, or I want to bring her to nights. And they'll be like, here are my concerns and here are the positives, right? Because it's always important to not just put somebody under a microscope and look at the things that, they're doing wrong. Like this is a progressive process. This is not a stagnancy, right? If they think they're ready, that's progress, right? Because that means that they feel like they have reached exactly. And I'd rather have that than the opposite of it, right? Like I want people that are motivated.
Freaks out in the moment.
Yeah. And that's the part that is coming back to being a lead PA, and part of the role that I've learned is, talking with people and sometimes telling them what they don't want to hear is the best thing for them, even though they don't understand it. And that is a very, that's a skill that you have to learn how to do. That's what I have learned personally. Some people are naturally good at it. It's been something that I've had to kind of really take notes on and talk to some of my colleague surgeons and just ask them like, hey, what do you think about this? And that's what I love about where I work. I'm just going to say that right now is part of the reason I have stayed where I'm at and I have scaled up. I've had tons of job offers locally, nationally, all paying way over what I'm getting paid even now and with a better schedule. But I like the team I work with, right? And so that is a huge factor of me staying is because I can call any one of the surgeons right now and they're just going to pick up unless they're operating, right? Or sleep recovering from a call shift. I promise you, they will pick up. And that is a relationship that you grow into over time. There's a buy-in. You don't just get that because you joined the team. That's like thinking you're going to start on the starter five for an NBA game, right? No. You got to earn your right to be on the field. And there are different levels and tiers to this. And then as you progress in your career, your confidence grows. Everybody sees you growing. And that's like the environment that I would say you want to be in is where you got coworkers that are like, you're doing a great job. Just keep hustling, keep doing it. Everybody needs to feel safe and encouraged in their environment and pushed a little bit, right? Where it's like your coworkers are also going to check you a little bit, be like, yo, what's with this? And that's okay too. It's just part of the nature of a high functioning cross-functional team.
I think too in medicine, there's a healthy amount of egos I've run into, right? And some of it I understand is justified, right? If you're in medicine, if you're in a specialty, like you've got to be smart to be there. You're not, you are one of the brighter bulbs in the shed if you're doing what you're doing. And I always joke that they wouldn't even let me in PA school, but my brain works in a different manner.
No, you would have been great.
But
the hustle you got.
Thank you. But I think it's so important to hear from people like you who have been able to move up the chain, if you will, because I think there's a lot of people, especially in upcoming generations, who see the lead APP role. They see the director. They want to go and become a leader, but there's no sense of delayed gratification of it. There's no sense of I've got to bust my balls to get to that point. It's not just given to you, right? And in our world today, everything is so instant. And then you have surgeons that have gone to school for X amount of time and they've got a healthy ego. And then you've got providers that have got a healthy ego. And then you've got this super intense specialty where at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about what you have next to your name. It's about, like you said, the compassion for saving lives. Like what you're doing is a matter of life or death. And how would you, I guess, as a leader, explain how you've got to where you're at now, given all of that dynamic, like given all of the challenges that I'm sure you went through as a new grad PA starting with the hospital?
I would say the first part of trying to move up in anything is showing a dedication to the trade. Right. So, I chose trauma surgery, but what people probably wouldn't know is that I spent, the better part of 2 years doing perioperative, post-op care, pre-op and post-op care. I was like, a lot of people would just call it like a surgical hospitalist almost.
Okay.
And that was the first part of my 2 years of like engaging with this team. And then as I also advocated for myself and spoke to people and said, hey, like, I just feel like I'm ready for whatever it is. And I'm not going to lie that when I was brought on, there was a lot of things that were said, right? So I had expectations of things going a certain direction. And when there was never a clear path to that, I always got frustrated. And I think that's good that people stand up for what they were told, and voice their concerns for when that, what they're told is not coming through. I think that's probably very real to a lot of providers in America.
Yes.
And so that's why I say open, set expectations, and bring that adult-like spirit to the conversation. Because if you're just letting somebody walk over you, that's probably going to be your whole future, right? You have to have the commensurate respect for yourself in those conversations to advocate for the right position. And that's the mold of what medicine is growing, hopefully out of right now, is that, you know,
Yeah.
the first PAs of the profession had to convince the hospitals to hire them, right?
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
mentor, my mentor was telling me the other day, dude, I had to convince the chief of surgery to hire me. And this guy that just retired, that mentored me that did this job for 30 years, he has like probably one of the biggest fingerprints of teaching surgeons all over the nation all of the surgical bedside procedures. And he'll never get
Wow.
a credit for that, right? He'll never be named for that. But that's his fingerprint on the profession now, after 30 years of doing, high level trauma resuscitations in Fresno. The guy's just that guy.
Mhm.
And, you know, you have to grow in the basics of the profession to then scale up. And then you have to advocate for yourself in the way that your leadership is going to hear you. If
Yep.
you just go up to the table and you think that you have the right answer for something, well, the truth is probably that's already been discussed, tried, and failed, which is why that hospital is in its current situation. And if you don't bring a reasonable idea to help kind of fix some real core problems of the business,
Mm-hmm.
there probably is not going to be a whole lot of attention to what you have to say. There has to be
No.
consistency. There's got to be professionalism, that communication that we were talking about, right?
Right.
And yeah, it's just, I feel like well-run organizations have a very good ear for wisdom, and
Mm-hmm.
and you can't, it makes sense when something is right.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, in the process of making changes to a level 1 trauma center and how the APPs flow, which has been one of the things that we've started together, is getting all the PAs from just starting off on the floor to now rotating through trauma resuscitations on nights, surgical and trauma ICU, and then back to the floor for what I consider a reprieve, to be honest with you. Everybody on the floor
Mm-hmm.
hates it, because they just start there. But then it's like, after you learn how to deal with all the emergencies, and then you can kind of regress into a slower role a little bit. It's nice. It's nice to have a break.
Yeah.
And so that was a idea that I was a part of, right? And helping kind of guide that has been an ongoing thing that we're actively still going through right now. It's like call it a pilot, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It's got its
Research.
growing pains. I can tell you that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and it's a little bit different too in trauma surgery, because we are the primary care providers. We don't just cut and walk, right? We don't just cut and go. We cut,
Right.
we stabilize, we cut, we take care of, we dispo. It's like we are the full-fledged service of what a hospital needs, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's very involved. So sorry, that was kind of like a long answer to your question. It's like how I got to where I'm at, but it's like the context of
No,
where
that's
I'm
great.
at in my profession. I know that all the other hospitals out there are going to have different PAs at different levels trying to get in and engage in things. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just going to be different from situation to situation, especially based off of how the leadership wants to see the department grow. If the leadership's
Yeah.
not there and they don't want to see this happen, then you're knocking on a hollow door. Like just
Exactly.
stop wasting your breath.
And
Like, go take care of yourself.
yeah, I think too that, and I talk about this a lot because I think there's so much room for advocation for how PAs fit into the healthcare ecosystem. And there's so much back and forth about PAs and NPs and scope of practice and how they're, no PA is trying to become act as a doctor, and if you work collaboratively and you join an organization where the PAs are valued, and like you say,
Mm-hmm.
you advocate for yourself and you track your numbers and your productivity and here's what I've done, here's what I've learned, here's what I've
Mm-hmm.
actually, impacted. There's no way for you to fail because you have strong mentors and leaders that are looking out for you. And it's to the benefit of the hospital for you to stay and rise up rather than to leave and go somewhere else because of continuity of care, because of everything else. And I know in trauma, it's a little bit different, but it's still so valuable. And I think a lot of people don't look at it from that relationship perspective. And it boils
Yeah.
down to that. Like, choose the people, don't choose the job, don't choose the title,
Yeah. Yeah.
choose the team, choose the mentor.
Yeah. I feel like anybody that's played on a high school basketball team or a soccer team, and in just one game, right? You do have to win something to feel that feeling as a team. That whole process is very real. But if you don't have that connectivity with what's going on locally around you and how things are going, it's that process in and of itself becomes, a good reason to move
Yeah.
on too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
if you're not being taken care of, you're not being respected, and you're not part of a good group, then the onus is on you to make a good decision for yourself. And I have,
Yeah.
I know a lot of colleagues that have done that, and they're in a much better financial place right now because of it. And that's so it's nice. It's nice to be in America. I'll just say that. You can do, you have so much freedom to be able to move from one side of the spectrum to another.
Yeah.
And being an APP right now is like, man, whatever you want, right? It's a good time
Right.
to be
Yeah. There's so
an
much
APP.
opportunity
Yeah,
for sure.
huge.
Awesome. Cool. Well, this has been fantastic. I think it sheds a lot of light on a few different topics that I think stay top of mind for people, especially if they are wanting to move into leadership or they're feeling a little bit stagnant or they're shying away from a specialty or feeling like I've been here for 2 years and I'm still not to the point where I feel confident. It's like stick in it, right? And know that if you're on the right team, if you're with the right people, you stay consistent, you show up every day, you're passionate, and you give it your best, like things are going to pan out for you. And if they don't, like you said, you're in the driver's seat. I mean, if you feel like you're not going anywhere or the organization is never going to give you that chance, then make the change. There's nothing wrong with that as well. But
Yeah.
also, I like to look at it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just maintain healthy relationships as you exit, because it matters. It
Yes.
matters.
Yes.
It's so important. Yeah. Like you want to maintain those healthy relationships and just standing up for yourself will say a lot to the people, right? It's, you know your value. Find a good team, because I think everybody wants consistency in being taken care of holistically. We're not in an era where pensions exist, right? Your 401ks are not as super reliable, right? So a lot of people are
wouldn't count
motivated
on it at this point.
yeah, exactly. With the way that things are going, it's just like a lot of people are in a position right now where they want to make the best decision for them this year, not the next 10 years. So
Yeah.
Exciting times.
It is. It is. I know. I'm like, it's so funny because my parents are teachers and so they live now off of their pension. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to put too much into my 401k. I think I'm going to go put in the real estate market and things that I can count on. And I know that's still, you never know. But I mean, with the rate that things are going, who knows?
I'll tell you this right now that I've had on my own. So I'm 37 years old. Like I've had my own, headaches with investing money. And I'm only, I've been working since I got here, since I was 18 when I moved here from Turkey. I've been working this whole time. And my retirement account is not something to look at and be proud of, right? It's not.
That's okay.
It's just, it's like, it's not the goal. The goal is being somebody that's driven, that's constantly working on things, and one of the things is work at a place where you know that you can balance your life, especially if you're a family guy, right?
Yeah.
You posted something, Madison, a while back, and it cracked a smile on my face. You said your work is not your identity.
Yeah,
right?
It's not. No.
And
I struggle with that. Like, I should take my own advice.
I think we all do. but we all do, right? And you're like, you're creating a brand, right? So your identity is going to be the way that you exemplify yourself through your product. And that's part of that process. And so you should struggle with that a little bit more than the average. But like for everybody else, you're just trying to work and just do a job. We can learn something from our the recent generations that have moved out of the workforce, is that like the people that were working all the time and barely at home, it was hard at home for the mom, right? And for those of us that are trying to pay the bills, develop our career, get that retirement, kill a cow financially, however you want to call it. It's like, there's so much that could take your attention off of just being a good person.
Yeah.
And that accountability part of being accountable to yourself needs to extend into the bigger businesses that are currently running America, in my opinion. That's another
Yeah.
topic
No,
for
I'm
another
with
time,
you.
but yeah.
I think that there's such a huge, and I talked about this actually in another podcast with the white coats, Michael Asbeck. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
Mm-mm.
he has a podcast, and him and the person that runs the podcast, they actually kind of see differing views on what is like the hustle culture. And for so long, and I struggle with it, is like I was raised by entrepreneurs. I was raised by people that told me to work hard. And I laugh and I say, like, some people are given generational wealth. I was given work ethic. Like, my parents taught me how to work really hard and to be the
Yeah,
hardest working one in
just
the
as
room,
valuable, just as valuable,
just as
right?
valuable. But it often is what I have to stop and think, okay, if I did my best today and I put in a solid 10 hours, and oftentimes it's 12 and 14 when you run your own business, but I have to be able to shut my laptop and go sit with
And
my
turn it off.
boyfriend by a fire and shut it off and not talk about work and not talk
Yeah.
about the challenges that I had that day or the wins that I had that day, good or bad, because work is work and it's important and it's your way to make a living, to do all the other things that are a part of your identity, right? So like I play music and I'm into fitness and I like to travel and I'm big on family. And so if I work, and then I'm on my deathbed and go, what impact did I make? Was I there for my kids? Was I there for my family? Did I,
Mm-hmm.
actually leave a footprint on this earth that is worth something and that will notably like be spoken about generationally, or did I
Right.
just let the hustle culture entirely consume me? And I think so many people are making that shift now of like, no, I'm not working 80 hours a week, and no, I'm not going to sell my soul to corporate America.
Yeah. And this is like part of that process as things continually get healthier in the workplace for people. One of the areas of medicine that is not really relevant to you or me and to this specific topic, but it's like residencies, right? Where you
Mm,
have surgical residents working 120, 130 hours a week, and then they have all these rules and laws, but like the reality is like the surgical profession has developed and procured surgeons with this 120-hour work week, right? Because
yeah.
that's what it took to get somebody to a certain level. And now that mind shift change is like actively going on right now. And I would like to toot our program's horn, and to the testament of some of the leadership that at our hospital, um, Dr. Amy Kwok and Dr. Larry Sue. I mean, there's so many more, like Dr. Krista Kaups. All of these, OG surgeons of the trauma surgical trade are like listening to the residents, trying to make changes while not breaking them, systems. It's happening, and people are getting healthier, and they're making better decisions like that because people are realizing that, like, at the end of the day, it's not. It doesn't. Yeah, like if we take
How
the
can
if we
you, I
take the
mean,
most
you can't
important thing,
show
go
up.
ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I was
you
going to
can't
say you
show
can't
right.
show up at your best. If you're
That's
working
it.
120-hour work weeks and you're burnt out
Yep.
and you're like completely abandoned your family, I mean,
Yep.
how does that
That's
contribute
exactly
to the
right.
outcomes? And I would be curious to see the data around like if a surgeon is working 80 hours, do the outcomes of their surgeries
They
statistically
do.
show
They.
better
I.
than
I
that?
believe. I do believe that there is data that people have a poor way of making medical decisions after a certain amount of hours. I couldn't
Fatigued.
name the exact hours. It's like the mental fatigue. Those are medicine
Yeah.
decisions. Those are not surgical decisions because the amount of adrenaline through your system when you're operating in an emergency is a little bit different from making a decision about
Yeah.
which medication to start. Right? Let's just be real. But
Sure.
the
Sure.
but the reality is that it's we don't need people to still do that. We got enough people trained in the workforce, right? And if we don't,
Yeah.
then maybe we need to look at the business structure. But like all to that point of what you're saying, I couldn't agree more. Like be healthy,
Yeah.
be balanced. And that's something my colleagues have been saying. You need to chill out. You need to slow down. It's like you take on a role and you're like, no, I got to do this and I got to do this. And you realize, man, if I quit
Yeah.
tomorrow, this place still runs. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
don't take yourself too seriously.
The other day we were going out with some friends. At the end there was like a counter with these gummies and I'm like, do those have CBD oil in them? And he was like, no. And I was like, all right, I've had a hard day. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sometimes you realize you just kind of chill out. And I'm not advocating for CBD or not advocating for it. I'm just saying, like, everybody
This is like a
struggles with
whole,
it, and you just have to chill
yeah,
sometimes.
this, the key here, and this is to anybody that's actually going through this in their life, which I bet there's a lot,
Yeah.
is if you have taxed yourself to a point in your work environment where you are now dependent on a substance,
Oh,
you
yeah.
need to wake up. You need to wake up. Now, I'm not saying there's not a role.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, we push some amazing drugs. We got the purest drugs. We are amazing drug dealers in the trauma bay, depending on how you want to put it.
California, I don't know. I think they've got a whole different take on all of this.
Yeah, we
I'm in Georgia. It's a little different.
Yeah, we have. I mean, it's a respect for what chemical can do what based on what we know. Your limitation and my limitation for making a good decision is going to be based off of you and me knowing that what we're reading is good, right? And full of information that will help us make better decisions, right? So like drinking too much alcohol, it goes through a zero pass metabolism. It's toxic.
Yeah.
And you're doing it every night. Your skin, your liver, your brain, my God, like don't do it. But hey, if you need to chill out and have a martini twice a week with your friends to chill, right? Go smoke a J. Yeah. Like who cares? Like nobody cares. If you think you care, maybe you're a little late to the party, but like I don't care. Like just
as long as you're not hurting anybody else.
Just stay in your lane. That's it. Stay in your lane and don't exactly what you just said. Don't risk somebody else's health because you brought your addiction to work.
Right. Yeah.
That's the key.
I don't drink, and that's for me the biggest thing is, I've seen people that I love lose people that they love over people that make stupid decisions when they drink. And I've never had a problem with it, but I think that a lot of people in high stress environments do, and they turn to that like any substance, right?
I went through about when I started doing trauma surgery, right? I fell into that crux of alcohol, and it taxed my relationship, it taxed my marriage, and there was a point in time where I had to be like, okay, you know a lot, but you don't know that much because you're making stupid mistakes, right? It's just like sometimes you just have to the basics. Like when you're living such a high-paced, high-fast life, like a fast-paced life where you're just missing the basics, it's time to take a reality check. And
100%.
Lucky for those of you who have a loved one to point that out to you, right? Which I do. Yeah. Which is great.
Yes. It's incredible. Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Hopefully this has shed a lot of light for people. I love the conversational approach and just being able to go down these rabbit holes and talk about anything and everything. So thank you so much for coming on the show. And I will link Andrew's LinkedIn as well, so that if anybody wants to connect with him, I think they're currently looking for a PA, if I'm not mistaken. So if anybody's interested, wants to take on the world of trauma surgery, then reach out to him. And thanks so much for listening. And thank you for coming on the podcast, Andrew.
Thanks again, Madison. Appreciate your time.
Of course.
Thanks for listening to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we provide a platform for you to ask hard questions and get real answers. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more episodes every other Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern.